Oh, great. Aaron's got the ball.
Please don't screw this up.
We are so fucked.
I don't know why you guys are acting like this is so hard for me.
Aaron, you are so bad.
What up, gamers? I'm Aaron. Now, every guild has got that one guy who's still fucking up Styx Bunk Chunker. But if you're looking around at your guild and thinking, all of my guys are that one guy, well, that's a sign that you might be ready for your next home in World of Warcraft. So in this video, I'll give you a couple tips that it might be getting close to time for you to hit the old /G quit. And after that, I'll give you a few tips on how to land safely in your next home. So first things first, if you're miserable, it's time to go. I can understand why you might not. You know, I personally have put up with some terrible things for loot, and I'd even recommend ambitious gamers do the same. But if you're coming out of every raid night wanting to quit World of Warcraft, then you gotta get out of there before your motivation is toast. But sometimes it's not so easy to tell when a guild is holding you back. So one of my favorite ways to feel out things that WoW guilds do is to compare it to like a real-life workplace or a job environment. So the other day when a friend of mine mentions that his guild leader does not allow them to assign healer cooldowns, I got right to crafting an expert analogy. But we'll get back to that in a minute. First, let me bring you up to speed on the situation. This here is Broodkeeper Diurna. She's the second to last boss in the Vault of the Incarnates raid, and this little troll guy here is actually me. I was playing Death Knight at the time and tanking for this boss, so please excuse the UI. But anyways, on one of these egg sets, I think it was this one here, I would get hurt way more than usual. It wasn't enough to kill me, but if I was gonna die anywhere, it would probably be here. So I went ahead and talked to my healer, and I said every time we get to this point in the fight, I want you to Ironbark me, no matter what. And I think personally that that is way better than, you know, every single pull for 200 pulls, queuing up my mic and saying, hey, can I get an Ironbark? Nobody wants to hear that for 200 pulls. But in my friend's guild, this wasn't just discouraged, it was actively forbidden. He would make sure if I wanted that Ironbark, I would be hitting my mic every single time, and all 18 other people would have to listen to it. Seems ridiculous, right? So let's get back to my masterful analogy. How would this work in a work environment? Okay, alright, so imagine you've got a desk job. And every day around like 10 a.m., an hour or so into your shift, nature calls, you've got to go to the bathroom. Your coworker knows this, and he's fine with it. But all of a sudden, middle management appears to save the day, and informs you that if you want your bathroom break, you need to confirm that you have permission from your coworker. So now, every day, you have to send an email to this guy saying basically, hey man, can I go take a shit? You're always gonna ask, because you've always gotta go. And he's never gonna say no, because he doesn't want to work with a guy who just shit himself. But now instead of just, you know, going and doing your thing, everyone is inconvenienced by this email requirement. Pretty great analogy, right? Well, for some unrelated reason, a friend of mine recently told me that I'm not allowed to make analogies anymore. So I'm gonna make sure the rest of this video is analogy-free. One of the things I wish I noticed when I was a noob myself was when guilds do things that just actively restrict your ability to improve yourself or set yourself up for success. I'll give you an example from my first real Mythic raiding guild, Lagging IRL. To take you back to the ancient times of 2020, Shadowlands had just come around, and they wanted to make assigned Mythic Zero groups for the first couple weeks of the expansion. This in and of itself is not really a bad thing, until I look at the rosters and see that myself, a plate-wearing Blood Death Knight, was about to be in a group with 4 cloth wearers. So instantly, I'm getting fucked over because these 4 Mythic Raiders can't just pug a tank. It's really important that you don't let your guild do things like this that just blatantly ruin your chances of setting yourself up for success. If something like this occurs, you need to be an advocate for yourself. Most people will be understanding if they see that you're coming from a position of wanting what's best for your character's progression. But truly, one of the most blatant examples of a guild expecting you to fuck yourself over occurred just a couple weeks later, when my fellow Death Knight friend shows up to raid with his head hung low like he was a neutered dog. Oh shit, that's an analogy, god damn. So my fellow Death Knight shows up looking real sad, and I ask him, hey man, what's wrong? To which he tells me that our raid leader had told him he had to craft the reanimated Shambler legendary. This thing was not just incredibly expensive at the time, it was also incredibly useless. So now, not only had he just wasted a ton of money on this terrible legendary, but he was 2 weeks of soul ash behind, and he'd have to farm all of that back before he had any hopes of doing actual damage. I don't mean to sound like an elitist, but sincerely, if you're in a guild that plays at a lower level like we did at the time, there's a very high chance that your raid leader is also a dumbass. There's not a ton of great raid leaders just hanging out in 3 of 8 guilds for the love of the game. So, if they ask you to do something like this that sounds absurd, make sure you triple check it before you follow them right off a cliff. I think the biggest sign that your guild is on a negative trend is when they always struggle at the end of a tier rather than at the beginning. My last guild had a serious problem with this. We would come out swinging, kicking tons of ass early, and then completely fall apart by the end boss. You know, Mythic Sarkarath was something that for the average guild took about 100 to 120 pulls. But for us, it took us 460. That is completely absurd. And, you know, when it comes the end of the tier, and there is some inevitable roster turnover, it's going to be multiplied 10,000-fold. Because all of the nerd screams that are accompanied with, you know, killing an end boss are now replaced with people who are just glad it's over. And anyone who knows that these pull counts are ridiculous is already going to be looking to leave. The only people you can recruit to replace them are people who are okay with this lower world rank you've probably slipped into. So, you know, if you're in a position like this, it's probably time to fire up the old guild applications. If you want to stay, it might be alright, but it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Now here's where I'm going to throw in a pretty important disclaimer. Be realistic with yourself. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, but really, some people need to worry about themselves before worrying about being held back by anyone else. Not saying it's you, just saying, some people. There have been times where I was some people. So, should you leave your guild? Well, maybe. What you should be doing is trying to find the right home for you. And that could even be exactly where you're at right now. You know, unfortunately, we can't all be being held back by our guild. Some people are just right where they should be, and a couple people have to be doing the holding, of course. So what I would encourage you to do is just try to focus on being the best player you can be wherever you are. You might not be able to drop 99s on every boss if your guild takes forever to kill them, but realistically, even in a terrible guild, you can get pretty damn good. But if it does feel like you're ready to take the next step, then I would encourage you to do so. If you're going to go that route, then let's talk about some tips to make that transition way smoother. Alright, so you've left your guild. Now, it would be incredibly asshole of me to just leave you here alone. So I'm actually going to give you the cheat codes to any guild application you will ever encounter. If you want to thank me, feel free to write a couple paragraphs in the comments about how nice it was when you subscribed to my channel. But, real quick, we'll go through these. So the first question you're going to see on pretty much any application is what is your character name? And I'm not going to lie to you, I can't help you with this question. If you can't figure this one out, you're not ready to raid in World of Warcraft. But, with some hard work, I think you'll get this one down eventually. So, about question 2 is usually where places are going to ask to see your logs. And what constitutes good enough logs here is wildly different depending on where you're trying to go. If you're looking for just an AOTC guild, you know, even a couple 50s in Heroic will probably do some good work there. If your logs look really good, you know, you can probably feel free to move up a pretty significant amount. But if your logs are looking kind of stinky where you're at already, then you might want to either think about staying a little bit longer to fix some of the problematic logs, or, you know, kind of trying to make it clear later on in the app that you might not have been as comfortable with the spec you were playing this time. So, please list any off-roll experience you have. Now, to be clear, it's very unlikely that a guild is going to try to recruit you for the role that you're not applying in. If they have a good DPS application, they're probably not going to ask them to heal. They'll probably just look for a healer applicant. Realistically, this is them being polite when they ask you if you're a one-trick. Because if you're a one-trick, your use is a little bit limited compared to someone who might be willing to FOTM reroll. And that's mostly just because as you go higher, you're going to hit bosses that are going to have pretty strict compositional requirements. A good example from this tier is One-Armed Bandit, where you wanted as many Affliction Warlocks and Shadow Priests as you possibly can. This is a pretty stark contrast to every other boss ever, where you want as few Affliction Warlocks and Shadow Priests as you possibly can. Number 4 might be the hardest question, depending on how gamer you are, and that's to tell us a little bit about yourself. Basically, what they're doing here is they're giving you the opportunity to prove that you are a normal person that can be trusted with a raid spot. Try not to say anything about, killing small animals, bombing Blizzard headquarters, or anything at all about League of Legends unless it's playing ARAM. What is your guild rankings or history? This is basically just them trying to see, your trajectory. If you've been playing in World Rank 2000 for the last 6 years, they're probably going to look down on that if you're trying to jump up 500 ranks immediately. But if they can see a steady climb, then they'll probably understand that it's very possible for you to continue on an upwards trajectory. Number 6 is please provide a screenshot of your UI in raid combat. This is a sort of bear trap question. They don't actually care about your UI. I guarantee if you look like an arena player from 2007 with the full default UI, but you perform well, then they aren't going to actually give a shit. This is mostly just checking to make sure that you care enough about your application to spend 10 seconds getting a screenshot. I see apps all the time that can't even figure out this question, and it's just a big red flag. If you don't care enough to get a screenshot, you probably don't want to be in the guild that bad. Number 7, why did you leave your last guild? Now this one is where you want to kind of roleplay your ex-girlfriend when she broke up with you. You want to really master the it's not you, it's me type mentality, because nobody wants to hear you talk shit on your last guild. I've seen tons of people try, and very few of them are smooth enough to pull it off. So you're going to want to say some shit like, I had a great time playing with this person or this guild, but I feel like I really need to move on and find myself and push myself to the next level and really see what I can do in this next world rank. Something like that shows that not only are you capable of having a relationship with a guild and existing as a normal person, but you're also interested in pushing it to the next level. Number 8, can you make our raid times? This is another idiot check question. Why would you ever say no to this? If you can't make the raid times, there's really no reason to have been applying to this guild in the first place. So if you're ever answering no to this question, back up and find a different guild. Are you comfortable sitting out for some fights? This is another question where people are just trying to see if you're a normal person that can be trusted with a raid spot. There are 8 million reasons that they might have someone sit out for a fight, and only 6 million of them involve the fact that you suck. So, realistically, no matter what, at some point, everyone's gonna have to sit. Going back to the one-armed bandit example from earlier, someone has to sit out so all of these terrible shadow priests can move in, and sometimes it might be you. You've got to be comfortable with that if you want to play at a competitive level. Number 10, why do you want to join our guild? This is them telling you that you can jerk them off if you want to, and realistically, if you're interested in moving up in your career, you might want to jerk them off. Say something like, it really seems like you're a cool group of guys, and I'm looking to take myself to the next level and kill bosses quick, alongside a great environment of dudes, or some shit like that. Basically something that says, I want to play with you. I don't just want to raise my rank. I want to get in with this guild. The more people feel like you want to play with them, the more they're going to want to play with you. And my last example for the day is, do you have any questions for us? You'll probably see something like this at the end of every guild app, just like you might hear this at the end of any job interview in real life. Your main goal is to have a question here. All they want to know is that you care enough to have made a question. It could be anything. It could be, what does the trial process look like? It could be, how does your guild prepare for bosses? It could be, how much gold can I take out of your guild bank every day? Just make sure that you have something here, because you don't want to look like you don't care enough or aren't smart enough to think of a question. But realistically, after watching this video, you might have several questions. Is my guild holding me back? What's a good question for question 11? Well, no matter what you're wondering, feel free to throw it in my comments section, as I read every single one and would love to help you, or hear how shitty you think my video is today. But, regardless of that, if anything that I've gone over today is useful for you and you'd like to see what content I've got coming up soon, I'd love to have you subscribe as a subscriber. My name's Aaron, and thanks so much for watching. Peace. you might want to jerk them off.